episode 3 of the Spiritual Sessions with me, RachelKeene. And this week I thought we'd talk about the plan, the life blueprint that I mentioned in the last episode, and talk a little bit about some questions that I've received over the years about how life on the other side works. So let's start with the plan. So how many times have you asked yourself, why me, when life takes a turn? I know I used to. And do you assume that life is something that happens to you? Well, I feel empowered enough to say, why not me? And that is the answer that my guides actually gave me years ago. I believe it's not down to fate or the gods or whatever we want to blame or thank for our life turning out the way it is. It is in fact ourselves. The reason I believe this, I've been shown many things in communication with my guides over the years, and I've been told in these communications that we are the ones who decide upon and write our life plan before we leave spirit to come here in the physical. Yes, that's right, we choose when or if to come here at all. We may choose to write ourselves a life with tough challenges, heartbreaking ones sometimes, in order to gain insight and knowledge into what we can endure, what our limits might be, how to be of service and support to others, and to understand what it is that motivates us here when we are so far removed from source. You know, we're here in the meat suit full of chemicals and hormones and things that could cloud our judgment. Having the human experience. So we have amnesia concerning our past lives and life between lives at source whilst we go through the trials of physical life, because it would be like cheating on an exam if we already knew why we're experiencing everything here. This is boot camp. We come here to learn. We can receive guidance and snippets whilst we're here, but we can't have full access to the plan. What would be the point of being here at all if we could? So only when we return to spirit can we discover whether we learned what we set out to, and whether we rose to the challenges we set. We review our plan, our life lived. We could even play it back like a movie, determining whether we lived our life as best as we could. If it turns out that we didn't get it right at times, we learn powerful lessons from that. We may even decide to return for another very different lifetime, but build in and experience similar spiritual lessons and challenges to rise to cover the ground that we may feel we need to re-explore. We get to choose if and when we ever come here. We choose who we are born to, by agreement with them in our soul group, what happens to us. All the big stuff, even how and when we die, is written into the plan ourselves. Even pretty grim deaths, we write that into the plan. When we go back home to source, we can access all the information our souls experienced during this life. We can add and compare it with our previous experiences over other lifetimes, and become aware again of how these experiences make us grow on a spiritual level as an eternal soul. Spirit guides are just like you or I in that they can decide to come back to in their own life plan. But obviously not during a lifespan of a soul that they've agreed to look out for. That would be abandoning the mission for the other person. So let's say the big life events are landmarks in life, labelled A, B, C and so on. For example, birth, marriage, children, losing loved ones, serious illness, our own death. How we get from A to B to C, etc., that's down to our own free will and all the choices we make while we're here in the physical life. So there's the challenge. We have the plan, but how we execute that plan is down to our free will. And that's why we can get it horribly wrong sometimes, or even surpass our wildest dreams when we were writing that plan back at source. I too have had some horrible times, I still do in fact, but knowing why they happen gives me more of a sense of control. We are only as capable as our choices. And that includes our choices in how to react to what happens to us. I guarantee that we become far more evolved souls for all the joys, love, hardship and trials in each life we choose to experience. How we choose to accept things we cannot control plays a huge part in our own spiritual evolution. We're constantly exercising our own free will and choice while we're here. Hence, some people decide upon bad choices in reaction to their circumstances. You know, something terribly challenging can lead to some bad decisions out of almost like a knee-jerk reaction. How you choose to accept any situation you find yourself in, no matter how beautiful or dire a circumstance, makes all the difference to your state of happiness. Happiness really is an inside job. Choose to be unhappy in life and you shall be unhappy. Of course, life's not all sunshine and roses. We need to sit fully within painful experiences. We need to grieve, we need to mourn, and hold the mindset that we are capable of moving through the darkness to the brighter days again. Just hold the possibility in our mind. If you can get to choose acceptance and to live your life to the best of your ability, you can find happiness and a reason to go on, no matter how dire your situation seems or what you've been through. I speak from experience, and from the experience of many other people that I've found inspirational to speak to over the years. There is always light if we choose to look for it. I personally choose to be inspired by people with seemingly unsurmountable problems who choose to focus on what they can do in life and let no negative experience or hurdle prevent them from progress and being inspired to live fully. Limitations do not mean unhappiness has to rule your life. Know that the ultimate design is always your own, as you decided before this lifetime began. So I hope that's helpful. It helped me greatly back in the day. It really did. So now we move on to some frequently asked questions I've had over the decades. This is what I've learned. This is my own understanding and opinion based on my own experiences communicating with the spirit world and all I've been shown by my guides. It's in no way definitive for everybody. One of the things I've been asked very frequently over the years is, what does the other side look like and what do we do there? I've been shown by my guides, and I believe that we can and do create our own reality when we cross over. There's time, physicality and space and no constraints there. As for what source or home looks like, there are beautiful open spaces with the typical imagery that we've come to know as heaven. Endless fields and skies, amazing colour, beautiful huge building structures such as halls of records, halls of learning, like cathedrals. But on the whole, space and time does not apply there as we know it here. Think about it, space and time is constrained to how our planet moves through space. So we can and we do create our own version of reality over there. For example, if we wanted to recreate a favourite place from this lifetime, we can, although this tends to be temporary, as we learn to visit those places if they still exist here in the physical world. Even if we want to build ourselves a palace, we can, but equally we don't need to be anywhere at all. We can just exist in a pure light form. We're talking about a dimension which is infinite in time and space. The limits of time and space we exist within here. In the third dimension, I can't emphasise enough, don't exist there. So it's hard to comprehend. Free of burden caused by the necessities of day-to-day existence in the human body, we turn to what is important: love, peace, and acquiring greater understanding of all there is. Many of our traits and behaviours while we're here are influenced by hormones, chemicals, and the physical body, the meat suit. Strip away all of that interference and we have clarity. Naturally, there'll be those who choose to be of service of some kind to their fellow spirit in source, or to mankind here on this plane. But there will also be those who are needing a break from the human experience and wish to exist on the other side in a private state of bliss. We tend to do that when we've had a particularly challenging lifetime here. We need a break. As I've probably mentioned before, my own brother refers to himself in spirit as a spiritual paramedic, as he helps spirit become acclimatised to life over there after a traumatic passing out of this world. And he showed me there are many who work as he does. My grandfather's great love was football, and he showed me he visits all the matches he can here in the physical world. Now he is free to be where he chooses at any moment. There are some who work with healers and mediums here on the physical plane, often as helpers, enabling people to stay here long enough to complete their life plans if it's not their time to return to spirit when they fall ill. Many people who feel the pull towards medicine and research in cures are guided by teams in the spirit realms, often completely unaware of this spiritual guidance, but responding to it on some level anyway. Interaction or non-interaction with the living is a choice there just as it is here. Based on what spirit tell me, in their communications, I don't hear of many spirits who do nothing once they've crossed over. Most choose to interact for the greater good of the one consciousness in some way. So another question, do we stay angry or judgmental on the other side? Some people worry about what their family might think of them over there. All negativity is based entirely on learned behaviour or biological issues in this physical world body and the mind. And it's easiest to exist in source once we cross over. Again, the old meat suit. It creates challenges for us as spiritual beings. Our loved ones only wish to support and guide us for our greatest and highest good. They've got no desire at all to judge us or make us feel less than. We are their legacy. They want only what's best for us. Anger and judgment serve no purpose, so we don't take them with us. My grandfather was quick to anger in his physical life here. He had a bit of a temper. But he's as mellow as can be in the spirit world in his eternal form, and I was very surprised and happy to discover this, and that the same was apparent in others that I received communication from over the years. Do we remember past lives when we get to the other side? Yes. We remember all the experiences we had in all of our lifetimes once we cross over, and all our loved ones therein. Everyone that we meet, we recognise. All of our friends and loved ones. They're all part of our soul group. We remember because we have a soul memory which is much greater than the limited memory we have in the physical body. Often our spirit guides have been our friends or family in previous lives, so we'll remember all the roles we've played in each other's myriad lifetimes. Now here's a big question. Do heaven and hell exist? I'm here to tell you, no. But there are many different planes of existence. So for example, Hitler won't be in the same place as Gandhi, ever. When we cross over, most of us will return to a visually beautiful dimension which corresponds with what we will relate to. But remember, we create our own reality there. And upon arrival back home, we're greeted with a version of the descriptions of heaven we're all familiar with. Lots of green open spaces, warmth, golden light, glass towers, grand buildings like I mentioned before, waterfalls. We get to create our own reality there, so it will often shift into something a little different for each of us. As for hell, don't get me started on how things have been edited in the Christian Bible, but those who willingly choose to harm others in life with no regret or remorse for their actions have a dark plane of existence waiting. There's no escaping consequence, a potential eternity of darkness, wandering alone. As the universe is always seeking balance, they do have the choice to atone, to feel genuine remorse, which will then reveal exits to progressive planes. These planes can only appear when they realise they harmed other life forms and feel genuinely remorseful for having done so. Some come to this conclusion quickly, some never do. They stay in the darkness with their earthly memories. If they do feel remorse, two huge gateways appear, one on the right, one on the left. The left door is one leading straight back to rebirth in the physical plane, where they can write a blueprint to teach them most about what went wrong, to find redemption, to atone, and to see things from an entirely different perspective. If they make that choice, then, when they return from that lifetime, if they have atoned for past deeds or learned the lessons and rose to the challenges they could have last time around, the right gate is then open for them to progress to one of the better planes of existence. And this is where they're given the opportunity to exercise their free will. They can choose whether they wish to learn more and write another life, or stay a while on the other side to rest and absorb the new lessons. Choosing to come back here to learn more is an opportunity to progress further to a lighter plane, or potentially they can make bad choices again and it's back down to darkness again. Earthbound spirits are souls who choose to remain earthbound after leaving the physical body because they're fearful of what entering the light means. There are so many reasons why someone could remain earthbound. A state of confusion or terror at the moment of passing, or the questionable acts they committed in life. If they fear some kind of punishment awaits if they cross over, they might decide to deliberately linger here. They have no recollection of lifetimes eternal. They only hold memories of the life they just left. These are the ones, usually, that cause havoc. If an earthbound spirit revels in the memories of their bad deeds, they become so detached from their humanity over time they become demonic. This is what demons really are. Imagine being stuck between worlds for hundreds, even thousands of years, reveling in memories of evil acts they committed. They end up becoming feral at the very least, broken down into base animalistic behaviours, deliberately scaring the living by projecting their appearance or doing things to mimic that person's worst fear. If you were scared of clowns, they would show themselves as the worst one you could imagine. If your worst fear was being grabbed by the ankle at night, they'd try to do that. But thankfully, these lowest of earthbound entities are extremely rare. Even the most scary entity was and still is just a person, and as such can be counselled into remembering and reconnecting with their humanity, or worst case can be forcibly banished to the dark planes by a medium trained in this aspect of spiritual work. And this is work I undertake myself on a regular basis. I had to shift a particularly nasty one about a week ago, but they can be moved on. We all have the potential to make horrible choices, or to rise to life's challenges. We all have the potential to learn and evolve, be it in short moments where we make good choices, or in millennia of atoning for terrible acts. Free will determines that, here and on the other side. This next question is one that I'm asked a lot. Are those who commit suicide treated differently on the other side? Do they go to a dark plane? When we write our life blueprint, we can set ourselves such serious challenges that we write a potential exit. This can only happen if we've made agreements with others in our soul group to connect in this lifetime, for them to learn lessons in loss of this kind. If it's not our time, all heaven and earth is moved to save the person trying to exit. If someone crosses themselves over, it's back to the drawing board on the other side to find out what happened. It's the spiritual equivalent of expelling yourself from school. People who choose to end their life are not sent to a horrible dark place at all. They do, however, have to go through some serious counselling on the lower of the light planes before being able to resume existence with the rest of their soul group. It's not a sin, nor is it evil to cross yourself over. It's just an exit from this life. Spirit who cross this way are met by spiritual paramedics and angelic helpers to counsel the soul. People who make the decision to pass whilst under the influence of drink or drugs are counselled just the same. Some forms of mental illness can be debilitating for years, and the soul requires just as careful and lengthy treatment to recover as someone who's suffered so long but remained alive here. The soul can be put into a deep state of rest, often referred to as the sleep state, if they need to rest from lengthy trauma of any kind. And the good news is that there's no fire and brimstone, there's no eternal damnation for people who cross themselves over, just counselling, nurture and repair at soul level, always rejoining the soul group. The author Robert Schwartz sums it up well. He says, suicide is merely a form of transition. The most common reaction after one has moved through the transition is sadness, that one lost this hard-earned opportunity to be in physical body and learn. This is true even if the physical incarnation seemed impossible and unbearable. From the perspective of the other side, one sees opportunities one did not see whilst one was feeling thus so trapped. But for the most part, the ones who take their lives are souls on their own track, learning their own lessons. There's little the loved one could have done, whether it's a child's parent or a person's partner who dies. The one left behind needs to know, the other person made this choice, not me. In most cases, the practice is about compassion, to see how deeply this one was suffering, and that this one, no matter how hard he or she had tried, could not successfully learn the lessons that he or she came to learn in the incarnation. Food for thought there. I found that really comforting actually when I learned that. Next question is, do we miss the body when we leave it? Once we leave the physical body, we really aren't concerned with what happens to it. Obviously, we do prefer a respectful send-off, but that's more about saying goodbye to our loved ones rather than mourning the shell we leave behind. Think of it as shedding a skin, the meat suit I keep referring to, or leaving a vehicle that we no longer need to get around in. We dispose of it and we move on. It's just a vessel to get around in on the physical plane, just one of many. In the spirit world, we don't need a vehicle. We exist as pure energy. As most of us will have attended our memorial, then we'll have said goodbye to the physical shell. The only exception to this I've found in us caring about where our remains end up is where people who have been murdered have chosen to remain earthbound in an attempt to try to communicate with the living so that their earthly remains are found. This is so rare though. Most often they're collected by loved ones at the moment of death, and they cross back to source, and they find peace. Even if the passing was horrific, there's usually peace. And this next question, on the other side, do spirits stay at the same age and appearance as they were on Earth? There is no concept of being an age in our terms once we're in spirit form again. We can present ourselves as whatever age we wish to, from whichever lifetime we've ever had, or just exist as pure energy with no form at all. We can create our own appearance and surroundings in spirit, but we often choose to communicate with the living as we would have them remember us. This is to preserve familiarity and aid recognition through a medium of our own clairvoyant experiences. Many spirit people choose to appear in their prime when they communicate with the living. I've found this so often. In my experience, it tends to be how they looked in their 30s or 40s if they lived a long life. And there's usually a family photo somewhere of them in that era too. Quite often they'll present themselves with a certain hairstyle or a certain outfit that might be recognised from a photograph or a particular memory that the person has of them. Spirits don't always communicate at the same age they were when they passed over either. Quite often they want us to remember them as we would recognise them, and that's to preserve identification. Likewise, I've been asked so many times, do babies and children stay that age on the other side? I've found through my experiences that children here don't remain as children in the spirit world. It's only in this physical plane that we need a logistical way to be born and to grow to adulthood. We always return to our eternal state of highly intelligent adult sentience when we cross over to source again. So children also often choose to show an image in their first communication with the living to come through as older or the same age they would have been here if they'd lived longer. To prove to the family that they do go on, they always try to communicate with us on our level, within our frame of reference and understanding. If you're in an ancient building and someone says that they're aware of a child, that's an earthbound spirit. That's not a child that's in spirit that's visiting. If you ever hear somebody say, there's a child here, please ask them to cross that child over so that they can be at peace. Because if they're here, In child form, it's either something demonic mimicking a child, or it's a child that desperately needs help to be returned back to their soul group. Next question, what is the sleep state? I mentioned that earlier. This is a term I was introduced to by Spirit. The sleep state is a healing process for the soul. It varies between weeks, months, or years in our perception of time, depending on the severity of the damage to the soul while in the physical body. For example, a person who is a physical shell of their former self through a long-term illness such as cancer could be in the sleep state anything up to about 2 years in our concept of time. The soul is placed in sleep mode in order to be nursed back to the spiritual health required to cope with the rush of sensation upon returning to spirit. This repair of the soul is essential, as we are spiritually drained after a long battle with a physical illness. I was shown that after a short time of adjustment to the spirit state, the spirit person places themselves in a beautiful white marble temple, open on all sides to the spirit world landscape. Waterfalls, spires, towers, golden fields. The spirit's aware of almost being cocooned, of feeling loved and nourished spiritually, surrounded by loving carers, some of whom are loved ones you've known in previous lifetimes and in spirit from your soul group. These carers channel and radiate pure love, light and healing into the soul. It is a state of pure rest, complete and total restoration. Next question. Does a person who had Alzheimer's or mental illness recover after passing? Absolutely. All our faculties return once we return to spirit. I've received proof of this from my own brother Simon, who was mentally impaired by a lack of oxygen at birth in this lifetime, and he's now whole again, and became whole immediately. I've had visits from my 2 great aunties and my grandmother, all who suffered with dementia for many years before passing. I've also discovered that those living with dementia have a foot in each world. Their consciousness often leaves their bodies to wander around for a while or to communicate with the living, whilst they're still in their bodies. I was amazed to receive visits from my great auntie and my grandmother on several occasions before their passing, with entirely lucid conversations. It's often the more highly evolved and intelligent spirit who choose to walk wholly or part of a lifetime in dementia, in order to gain experience for their work back in spirit. They choose to gain the understanding firsthand in order to help others like them on their return to spirit. For highly evolved beings, they've done all the easier life experiences. With a detachment towards their own suffering, it's enough just to experience what it is like to walk in those shoes. Often that's reason enough for a highly evolved spirit who's seen many lifetimes, but difficult for us to comprehend on the physical plane, as we would ask, but why would we want to put ourselves through that? Yet our spirit simply answers, because I can. So once I was asked, how does the divine presence manifest itself on the other side? So the divine presence is not a persona. It's more an incredible force of pure love, life, good, and creative nurturing energy and understanding that we all come from and all return to. It's the source of all creation. Calling it God is just sticking a label on it. George Lucas had it right in Star Wars. He had the right idea. The whole concept of the Force was as close a description as possible as to what the God consciousness truly is. Referring to this universal life force as the source is probably the favourite way I describe it. But then how do you define the indefinable? So I'll put it this way. In all the communications with spirit I've had, not one person in spirit has said to me, "Do you know what, Rach? You're so wrong. I've met God." But I've been shown time and time again how we are all part of one huge source of creation. A single, all-encompassing force of pure light and energy that we all go back to. Next question. If we're on Earth to learn some lesson for our beingness, what purpose is there in human progress? Humanity has learned to make fire, clothe itself, become most adept at killing itself. What value comes from human progress? To me, human progress is all about making improvements to help our fellow man. A great number of the man-made evils in this world came from an idea that had good intent behind it, then got twisted. We are given the ability to invent, create and build, to enable us to achieve purpose according to our life plan. We also learn the consequences of our actions. Just because something can be invented, it does not mean it should. Case in point, the atom bomb. Life here on Earth is a big school, boot camp, science lab. That's how I've been shown life. And indeed, progress is perceived on the other side. This is only my personal experience. There's a desire from spirit to help us when things go wrong here. They feel our pain and suffering and help us. But at the same time, the help is given with the knowledge that the suffering is finite, because we always go back to spirit. The pain will always come to an end, and that's why so many painful events happen. Life is temporary, but our consciousness is eternal. This is one of the more difficult questions. Why do babies and children die? So it's always so sad for those of us left behind when a child passes on, especially hard and heartbreaking when a baby doesn't survive. It seems so unfair and wrong. But please believe me when I say, gently, this was meant to be exactly as it was, and there was nothing that could have changed it or prevented it. We are spiritual beings living a human existence. We live many lives, as I've talked about, and I've seen so many of my own and the lives of others that I accept this to be fact. And in the planes of existence where we reside between lives, we are safe, happy, and there's a complete absence of negativity in any form. In our true spiritual essence, we have an insatiable thirst for knowledge and enlightenment, so part of this desire to experience all that is includes choosing if and when we come here to the earth plane to learn something new in physical form. And some souls find it very difficult to be away from the light and love of the spiritual planes, and deliberately choose to have a very short time here. It's often those souls who decide to go back before experiencing the trauma of the birth process, or go back shortly after birth because being born was all they wanted to experience. Before we come here, remember, we write ourselves plans. Sometimes, if you can try to imagine, this earthly plane is the closest we come to hell, or the concept of it. So if you try to imagine that this is the place where we learn the most painful and incredible experiences right here, then it makes sense that we grow most from experiencing both sides of the coin, suffering as well as loving. I know those who pass back to spirit quickly are incredibly elevated and enlightened souls, just as my brother was. Only those souls who have learning of amazing capacity choose such a brief and challenged life here. You must also be a very experienced soul in your spiritual progress to have written a life where you would choose to experience the loss of a child. To have agreed to this in your life plan too. I hope this makes sense so far. I see life as an eternal one, stretching behind and before me in a huge loop. We never truly lose anyone. We will always meet our loved ones again between lives, and we'll agree to return with them time and time again in different lifetimes in order to share new experiences and new challenges to learn from. Please know that our babies and children are fine and well in the world of spirit, that their stay in the physical world was indeed intended to be brief. They knew before coming here that they'd find being here too painful after birth, that they could only tolerate it for short periods. When I first questioned the death of a baby with my guides, I was told that these souls often decided to come here purely for the experience of being in the womb, being loved, nurtured, hearing a mother's heartbeat, feeling unconditional love from a mother for her child. The medical conditions or circumstances that make sustained life impossible are part of their design. There has to be a cause to enable them to return to spirit quickly. If you've lost a child in your family, know that they are often with you, surrounding you with love and gratitude for having given them this experience of life here. Please try to think of them as a great intellect, who chose to be a part of your family until the time came when they had to return to spirit as planned. If this sounds too airy-fairy or strange, it took me a while to understand as well when I was first shown this. After all, we can only see things from our limited experience of the world here, so I understand completely if this is hard to grasp. When I lost my brother, the world stopped turning for a time, and knowing that there's a reason for this loss has helped me to carry my loss a little easier than I did before I knew why it had to happen. Another thing I've learned as well is that consciousness doesn't join the fetus at conception. This is also why I'm terrible at working out if people are pregnant in the early stages, because if I can't sense a consciousness in there, I can't tell. Consciousness can join the fetus during a pregnancy at any point. Very rarely is it from conception. I've come across that so rarely. What's most common is for the consciousness to actually join the fetus quite late on. So quite often, when we suffer miscarriages at a very early stage, the consciousness has not yet joined the fetus. I hope that's of some comfort too. So going on from that, how do babies communicate from the other side? Well, as I said earlier, babies and children, they don't exist there. But spirit who were babies in their most recent life here, but weren't born, often show themselves to me initially as points of light or stars around the person that I'm speaking with. They choose to introduce themselves in this way, as this is a symbol that I recognise to mean that this is the stage they were at in life here, rather than confuse me and to the person I'm sitting with by coming through as an adult or an older child to identify themselves. So once identified, they communicate in a completely adult way, just like any other spirit person, because in spirit terms, this is how they always were and always will be in spirit form. The only exception to this is when I've encountered mass graves where spirit may be earthbound due to a traumatic event which resulted in sudden and huge loss of life in confusing circumstances. Children only remain as children if they're earthbound like this, and with a little help from a medium, like I said earlier, these souls can be counselled and reminded of who they are and collected by loved ones or guided back home. Next question. Can children see spirits? Oh yes, they can. Children are the most recent arrivals from the spirit world. They're more open-minded. They might not even know if what they're seeing is a spirit or a physical person. It's all the same. All just people to children. They're not preconditioned yet to ignore the unexplained. Ever seen a baby or a child laughing at someone over your shoulder? It's usually a loved one pulling faces. Children often have conversations with spirit too, and spirit children who are earthbound, i.e. have not crossed over to be their eternal selves again yet, will be drawn to our children to play with, so they may be who your child is playing with or arguing with over which toy to play with next. Don't be scared if this happens. It's all part of how children are. They're pure beings. They just see things as they are. As we get older, we get conditioned out of that. We get told, there's nothing there. Don't be silly. You're making things up. So if your child tells you that they're seeing something, please believe them and be gentle with them. Is there any concept of time or eternity on the other side? Well, time is acknowledged when communicating with us here. That's for our needs and our frame of reference. But in spirit, as I mentioned earlier, it's not important. It doesn't have any meaning there. So, I think I've covered quite a few questions there that I've been asked over the years. I would love to do another one of these. If you have questions that you would love to hear my viewpoint on, do drop me a line. So you can either contact me through my website, RachelKeene.net, or you can email me at rachelkeene.net. Thank you for listening. Please do subscribe because there will be an episode roughly every 2 weeks. Until next time, more power to you. Take care.